Hello,
Hello,
welcome. Wow, that
Hopper.
intro is always so. Hi, David Carter. Nice to see you here. Welcome everybody to our DM deep dive with D&D in a Castle and DM David Carter, aka the Killer DM, and we'll find out what that means in a little bit. But welcome everybody. Excited to get to chat with you today and talk with more about David and his upcoming campaign in our USA event from July 6th through 10. So how you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I'm a little bit tired because we were playing D&D till very early this morning, but I'm excited to be here and can't wait to chat with you about my favorite subject.
Yeah, I mean that's the best reason to lose sleep, honestly, is a good D&D game. So, why don't we just jump right into it? Why don't you give us a little snippet or a teaser of what you've got coming up for us at the castle in the USA?
Yeah, gladly. So I have my own homebrew world, and I call it, well, the name of the world is Oria, but the setting and the campaign that I'm running is called Shadows Nigh. And it's a very interesting time during the overall story of my homebrew world. There's a lot of really cool things going on, and it's a pivotal moment. And so obviously the players and their characters are going to be central to a few main themes within the adventure. And what I always try to do is make sure that my players are extremely immersed and that everything that they're doing is high stakes. So in this case, they're going to be having the fate of the world in their hands, and their actions are going to pave the path forward for my game world, and everything that happens at D&D in a Castle is going to officially be canon and forge really the setting of everything that I'm building my own little network around.
That sounds awesome. That really sounds awesome. Why don't you tell us what your title means, the Killer DM? Is that something we have to worry about for your upcoming campaign?
So yes and no. I don't mean it to
Okay.
be an intimidating thing, and as any DM knows, obviously you can throw all sorts of different monsters at your players, and you could overpower them at a whim in a way. So it's not really meant to be me bragging or threatening or anything like that. But what I try to do in my games is very delicately and deliberately balance the stakes. And I want players to be on the edge of their seats at all times, worried that they may just die if they, not if the dice don't roll well, but perhaps if they don't do enough homework on where they're going or what they're going to be coming up against. If they lose focus, they won't do that twice, I don't think. So the Killer DM title, I guess, started with my home game years and years ago. I'd say probably 10 years ago, where every time my players encountered an enemy, or not necessarily a big boss, but just any combat encounter they went up against, it really seemed initially that it was hopeless and that they were going to lose. And so during the combat, they started saying like, "Oh, Dave's a killer DM. Dave's a killer DM." I'm like, "What? Like, what do you even mean by that?" Because this was early in my DM career. And they're like, "Oh, you're trying to kill us. You're throwing way too powerful monsters against us." And I mean, in the end, usually they just have a very engaging and intense encounter. And that's what I'm always going for. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that I'm not going to pull punches. Most of the time I do my rolls in front of the players. I'm a big fan of like letting the dice fall where they may. And if a character dies, then that's the game, right? And I'll always make sure that there's an opportunity for them to be revived, or but I encourage everyone to bring a second character.
You know what? With D&D, you have to. I think we've all been there. That's fun. That sounds like a really good time, and I like that there are stakes and that it's not easy. So I think what kind of player would want to be at your table? So it sounds like you have to pay attention for at least minimum of it. So what kind of player should be at your table?
I really respect the rules, and with like Crucible of Fate, the YouTube game show that I do, we rely very heavily on the rules, just to keep things fair because it's a competitive environment. So I like to give players the opportunity to really dig deep into the material and create a character that they're really excited to play that has very specific skills and abilities or spells. And I don't want to gloss over the specifics of characters by always saying yes to my players or being kind of very loose with the rules. So getting back to your question, I'd say someone who is really knowledgeable about D&D or wants to learn, but also someone who wants to be immersed in their character and what their character is experiencing and is willing to just put even a little bit of effort into role playing. Because what I want to try to provide is a world that's rich in detail. I really like to spend my time, especially initially, but even like ongoing throughout the game, giving enough detail of the environment and kind of hitting on all five of the senses at all times to really make sure that the players are in it and that they're feeling it. Because I find that once you're immersed, you can get carried away in the story and you really become your character for the time that you're playing D&D together. And to me, and many DMs say this, but when you sit back and you have players that are so immersed that they're just talking to one another in character and you don't even really have to do anything for a few minutes, it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, people that are into the rules and respect them, people that love to role play, and people that are really looking to get drawn in to a homebrew world, especially one that is a bit dark and twisted and filled with a lot of horror themes, which is what I try to do.
That sounds awesome. Sounds like we got some. Looks like we got some comments. People saying not trying to kill your players, but letting them know their stakes are on the table. Got to play careful if you're taking on scary monsters. Chris also said running away is also an option, and maybe that is an option too. But I think there's also you got to be smart when you run away too. There's you never know. So if you guys have questions or comments, please throw them in the chat and we will we'll answer your questions, especially for David here, as he's got his upcoming campaign at D&D in a Castle this July 6th through 10th. So what I would love to know is what brought you to playing D&D and becoming a dungeon master?
What brought me to D&D? So when I was a kid, I was really big into knights and medieval. That just, as soon as I saw that for the first time, I think I was drawn in just by movies from the 80s, cartoons and comic books and things like that. And I remember walking in the mall, the Fredericton Mall in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. And my dad bought me this book called Darkness and Light, and it was one of the preludes of the Dragonlance saga by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. And I think it was Tanis's storyline. And I had never really read like a novel bigger than 300 pages at the time. And I was just captivated from the moment I started reading. And I read that thing cover to cover in just a few days. I mean, I really couldn't put it down. And that just the magic and the monsters and the adventure, I couldn't get enough of it. You know, I wanted to see what's the next book. Like this, then I found out it was a saga and there was more characters involved and bad guys and all that stuff. And I was just at the age, I think I was 10, where I could be drawn in by some of these weightier stories with more characters. And just out of sheer luck, after I finished that first book, I was at a friend's place and he was a little older than me. And I walked in, and on his dining room table, there was some graph paper and like pencils and erasers. And then there was this cardboard stand that was in 3 sections, and it kind of like separated one person's seat from the others. And there was all these sheets of paper everywhere. And I could tell that there was like math and people were drawing maps. And at that age, I was really big into video games. And so just seeing this imagery, I didn't know what it was, but I knew I loved it. And so, of course, I started asking some questions, and he explained, well, this is Dungeons and Dragons, and one person's the dungeon master, and they tell the stories, and the other people are the players, and they can do whatever they want, and they make their own character. You can be anything they want. You can be a wizard. You can be a warrior. You can be a thief. And my mind just kind of exploded. And I just couldn't wait to play. I mean, I think we played right there and then, and it was the Against the Giants module. And so I started doing research, and I found the Dungeons and Dragons boxed set back in 1989. And a few of my friends were very interested, but no one wanted to be the dungeon master, as is always a common case, I think. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll do it. I'm interested enough to give it a shot. And that was it. I just started drawing maps and running adventures for a couple of friends. And now it's, I don't know, 40 years later, 30 years later, 37 years later.
Yeah. Who knows? Well, that's awesome. That sounds like a great way to get in to D&D, and I think a lot of people have a very similar story. We actually do have some questions in the comments too. Someone from Twitch is asking if this upcoming campaign connects to the story of Crucible of Fate, and I would love to hear also more about what story you do kind of have and what the hook is you've got for your players.
So it's a deep question, because I can see a couple of people here in the chat. I see Sean, and I see Kier, and who else is here? Dennis is here. All of these people are going to be
Your Crucible
on
following
the D&D weekend, first of all. And they're also part of Crucible of Fate. So I don't want to give anything away, because some of them are very much still involved. So yes, Crucible of Fate takes place in the Shadows Nigh universe, but just a very dark, twisted nook within the Shadows Nigh universe, in a place called the Abyssal Stair. So that's really all they've been exposed to, and we've been jumping around to some of these key locations in the Shadows Nigh universe. And yeah, the two stories are connected. And the themes between the D&D weekend and then the D&D Castle event in July are going to be very close together. But what will make them different is that before the D&D in a Castle game, hopefully 3-4 months beforehand, if the players have been identified, I want to help them build their backstories and really tie them into the key factions and the locations within the universe, to be able to weave that story that pulls them in and makes them front and center and makes them of paramount importance. So I have the themes to explore, but I won't know the exact storyline until we get their adventures. But a couple of things that we'll be exploring. So cut me off anytime, Hopper, if I start to ramble, because once I get into the lore of my world, it can be tough to.
Oh, we want to hear it.
So Oria is the planet, and some of the things that makes Oria unique is that its sun is in a static and stationary orbit. So what would be the North Pole of like Earth is directly under the sun all the time. So the top 15% of the planet or so is just desert. And then as you make your way darkward, like towards the equator, it's a very dangerous kind of outer rim Mad Max type setting, lots of pirates and marauders. And then you hit this area where you can no longer see the sun because it's static. It's, we're not orbiting and the world's not turning. So there's areas that once you go a certain distance, you run into what's called the Ring of Shadow. And the Ring of Shadow is this 600-mile wide band that goes all the way around the planet. Above it is where the sun is, and then beneath it, it's lit by this massive moon that orbits the equator. So you have this incredibly massive barrier called the barrier that runs right along the equator. It splits the world essentially in two halves, light and dark. The moon gives light to a bit of the dark side, and then about 2,100 miles on either side of this barrier. And this barrier is failing. And that is really important to the world and the inhabitants of the light side, because they know that it was erected for a reason, and a very important one, probably, given the size and scope of what it is. And it's extremely difficult to pass through. Very few people know what's on the other side. There's only a very small amount of trade and communication with some of the dark side areas. And with this barrier failing, there's a lot of fear. And people have noticed that there's a lot of monsters that have never been seen before on the light side. The light side is mostly animals and beasts and humanoids. But things like fiends are starting to appear, and aberrations and elementals. And so that's got a lot of people concerned. And there's a lot of fear that if the barrier fails, then what's on the other side? And is something going to come, pounding in like a Tarask, or is Takesis on the other side, or Tiamat? And I mean, I'm saying those things because that's not what it is. But it's that fear of the unknown, and
Maybe.
And also the mystery of, first of all, why is it there, and who made it, and why did they make this decision to split the world in half, and why is it failing? Is someone doing something intentionally? Is it accidental? Is it something that can be fixed? And a lot of nations on the light side are kind of scurrying around trying to answer these questions, and others are trying to take advantage of the chaos and the situation, and they're being quite expansionistic. So there's a lot of geopolitical things going on. There's the mysteries of the barrier, the fiends and elementals that have been showing up. They appear to be tainted in some way by not before seen dark energy. So they need to investigate what this dark energy called obscuri is and where it comes from. So these are the major themes: the geopolitical instability, the barrier failing, the appearance of these monsters, and the havoc that they're wreaking on the population, the fear that's being caused, and then the investigation of these new magical energy sources.
Yeah, no high stakes whatsoever, it sounds like. Sounds like a really chill
Yeah,
environment.
exactly. Yeah. And I really want, like I said, the players have to be front and center in this for various reasons.
Yeah. We actually have a question on character backstory, 'cause it sounds like that's going to be very important for your players. So speaking of being drawn in, Chris Lacey asks, what do you prefer for character backstory?
Like in terms of, like length, complexity, or just,
Yeah, maybe like what should a player at your table bring to the table? Do you want 12 pages? Do you want a paragraph, or like how in depth? Or like how much work do you guys want to go into it together?
I mean, ideally, if we have at least a couple of weeks before the game to prepare, if people can bring me ideas that's like half page or a page of what do they want their character to be about, and like what from a like a technical point of view, like background in the player handbook definition of background do they want to have, and what class are they, and I've got a well-established pantheon now, so is there a deity they're following? All of these kind of like big things that help define a character, their flaws, their ambitions, their motivations. It would be nice if those were identified, even if it's in the most simplest of terms. And then we can explore all those together so that we can create some short-term and medium-term goals for the character, like maybe in the first day of the adventure, what would you like to see happen with your character? And then over the 4 days that we have together, even though it's a lot can happen in those 4 days, and we can cover a lot of ground. So what ideas do you have in your head of what you want to see? And so using that material that a player would bring, I will do my absolute best to at least, I can't promise that it's going to happen, but I can at least try to present the opportunity for them to capitalize on what their ambitions are.
Awesome. Awesome. So it sounds like a lot of great working together on crafting that character background. And yeah, that sounds like it's awesome. You mentioned before that you have D&D weekends coming up, which was sold out almost immediately. You've been a one-shot DM at the USA Castle before, and you've absolutely killed my character there too as well this last summer. And now you're coming back at a table. What are you most looking forward to coming back to this castle? And yeah, what are you most looking forward to?
Oh, wow. So even the last time I was at the castle, even though we were working our butts off, it was such a blast. And just being in that environment of being around D&D for 5-6 days straight, it's just amazing. And you feel the energy of the clients that are coming to play. Everyone is so excited. Everyone is very enthusiastic. Being at the castle itself, you're in it, you're living it, and with you and Justin as the host, you're really living a story for 4 days. You're doing nothing but eat, sleep, and play D&D. So I just can't wait to, I love my family and my work and my son, my wife, but getting away for a few days and doing what my favorite thing in the world, which is playing D&D with people that are clearly invested. I'm stoked. The whole time I was there working with you, I just kept saying, this is so amazing. It's so great. Like, I just want to stay here, live here kind of thing. So yeah, I just can't wait to get back in that energy and create some incredible memories. My goal is to give people, and this is the same with Crucible of Fate, and if chat can pipe up if this is the case, I want to put you in these epic situations where people will be telling war stories forever. They'll never forget what happens in my game and what their characters did and what happened to them. Those memories are stored in the same place in your mind as your real life memories. So they're no less valuable, no less memorable to you. And I want to give ammunition for those war stories for people.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is it's just a different environment of being just surrounded by like your people who are all here to play a really great game of D&D and just talk about D&D for 3 days. It really, like you said, it's really something special, and you're playing D&D in a freaking castle. Like how can it get even better than that?
Yeah. And
yeah,
I want to focus too, and this is something I did with Crucible, and I'm doing it with my home games even more now. There's a lot of games that people play with their friends and in their home games where they have all these ambitions of where it's going, and they're like, okay, we're going to take our time. We're going to go nice and slow. We're going to start at level 1, and we're going to work our way through, and it's going to be great. And we're going to play for 10 years every week. And just you guys wait. It's going to be awesome. And then inevitably, you get busy, or someone has a kid and they have to leave the game, or their job gets too busy, or blah blah blah, and the campaign breaks down. And if that happens enough times, you end up playing all this kind of like low level D&D, and maybe you never even get to face a dragon, even though the game is Dungeons and Dragons. So in these intensive games, and with all my games now, I want to throw these legendary monsters and these legendary situations at my players so that they get an opportunity to find out why D&D is so exciting, and to give them the keys to open up their own imagination, inspire them to go home and run games for their friends that are just as epic, and spread the word about their experiences at D&D in a castle, especially, and in my games.
Yeah. So we are coming up to the end of our time. We got a couple more questions I think we could hit real quick before we say goodbye to all of our friends here. I'll do the quick one first. Someone on Twitch says, what is your favorite class to play or see played by somebody else? Mine is Paladin. It was my first character I played when I first started playing D&D about 6 years ago. And do love me a holy smite. It's nothing better than tacking on a smite, especially on a crit, that just have not felt as good since that. So what about you? What's your favorite class to play or see played by someone else?
I've got two. So Warlock and Rogue, and especially a multi-classed Warlock Rogue. I love the idea of a patron, of this like powerful entity granting you power and kind of being in some form of indentured servitude to them, whether against your will or with you fully embracing it. And then with the Rogue, just sneaking around, being stealthy, being able to infiltrate into certain environments, and maybe some assassination in there too. Picking locks, being careful, scouting. Those are some of my favorite elements of D&D.
Warlock and Rogue is a dangerous combo. I would be scared to be your DM if you were playing that at my table, for sure. So our last question is going to be, what would you recommend to apply to be a DM featured in your games? And so for our end at D&D in a Castle, you're welcome to come apply to be a DM. You can go to our website at dndinacastle.com and go to our Dungeon Masters page and to apply to be a DM. And there's got a great list of what we look for and what we think would make a great Dungeon Master. But what would you recommend as like advice for a new DM or someone wanting to come in and play D&D in a castle?
Like to play in D&D or to run games there?
Be a DM or like new DM advice or advice for a DM at the castle.
I think the most important advice I would give to any DM, whether it's making your way to the castle or even just like making your way as a DM, is that just don't ever doubt yourself. Don't be like a cocky jerk, but like you have to believe in yourself, believe in your story, and make sure that every day you're working on the craft of dungeon mastering. Whether you're working on your voices or your descriptions or crafting your own monsters, coming up with your own stories, every day make sure you're making progress in building your portfolio as a DM. And like with me, I've got a lot of goals, and it's important to be disciplined and just to have a bit of confidence in your own ability that you can achieve goals, whether it's to become a DM at D&D in a Castle or, write an adventure and publish it. It's just to have that discipline and break down what could be seen as a monumental task, or opportunity, such as being given an opportunity to run a game at D&D in a Castle, into steps that you can tackle one day at a time.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think a really great closing statement we got from one of our comments you see right up on the screen is, we may not be able to slay our real world dragons, but it's a powerful feeling to get together with friends and accomplishing something big in game. Very rewarding. And I can say that I think every table at D&D in a castle, you feel that because you're with friends and you're creating an awesome adventure together. So we hope you come and join us this summer at July 6th through 10th, especially at David Carter's table. If you really want to affect a world, it sounds like they need your help. So David, where can people find you online?
Big
Until
one
then.
is YouTube. So just at Crucible of Fate, the D&D game show. So yeah, at Crucible of Fate is where most of my content is. You can find me under the same name on Instagram and X, but I'm not really doing much there. I will be launching a new channel soon, so there will be an announcement going out on YouTube about it. But yeah, I'm going to move from the competitive actual play into like a DM advice and giving people some tools and stuff. So yeah, watch out for that. But YouTube's where you'll find me.
There you go. There you go. So find David at YouTube, and you can look more at our events for upcoming summer at dndinacastle.com/summer 2025, or use the QR codes that you see around us. And spots are filling up really fast for summer. So again, if you want to affect a world, let's get on it. So David, thank you for joining us today. It's really nice to get to chat with you. And why don't you go ahead and get us out with an invitation to join us at D&D in a Castle this summer.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Hopper. Great to see you again. And any of you out there who are thinking about doing it, look, what I can guarantee is that you're going to have a lot of fun playing at my table in D&D in a Castle. If you want to be a hero, be heroic, and I guarantee you I will give you the opportunity to do so in a very engaging, dynamic environment, and I can't wait to play some D&D with you.
All right, we'll see you guys later.